Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies, and we're celebrating the Phils' walk-off winner over the Milwaukee Brewers last night, courtesy of Nick Castellanos. Alec Bohm, a huge part of the win, a late homer for him. Christopher Sanchez, a great start. Turns out this Phillies team can actually beat other good teams. Who knew? Only everybody in Philadelphia. Also, they have a chance to complete the sweep of Milwaukee with today's afternoon game. We'll preview that and see how they can get that job done. And I could have mentioned JT Realmuto in the recap of last night's game, but he deserves his own segment after what he did yesterday evening at Citizens Bank Park. All of that on today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm Connor Thomas, your host. Thank you so much for checking us out here. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please, if you haven't done so yet, please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff that really helps us out here on Locked On Phillies. I very much appreciate everyone who's done that, who's going to do that. It's the best way to help me out with this content, and it's the best way to say, hey, I like what you've been doing on Locked On Phillies, so thank you. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. The Philadelphia Phillies, if you bet them on the money line last night with FanDuel, well, you were a winner. It didn't look like it for a lot of the game. The offense, dead silent for 7+ innings of last night's matchup with the Milwaukee Brewers. And honestly, the Phil's offense has not been great in this series. They have not been great recently. They weren't great on the West Coast road trip. But they still just keep winning ball games or winning enough ball games. I mean, they've been hot at home. They've been unbelievable. They're the best team in baseball at their home ballpark. They're tied for the best record overall with the New York Yankees. And last night, there were a lot of guys that didn't have their best nights, and then a lot of guys that showed up clutch for the Philadelphia Phillies. The first thing we're going to talk about, of course, is the walk-off, because Nick Castellanos' first pitch thrown in the bottom of the 10th inning was a walk-off winner, and it's great to see that for Nick Castellanos. It's awesome to see him get that moment. I know how people feel about Castellanos, but he's not going anywhere. So if you don't like him, you're going to need him to play well for the Phillies to reach their ceiling. If you do like him and are just annoyed he hasn't been playing well, then this should be a moment you should be proud of him for. And whatever the case, if you root for the Philadelphia Phillies, the dude hit the walk-off for you last night. So there should be no, why is he just doing this now? I know he struggled. I get it. That's a big moment. Maybe it'll jumpstart him even more. He's been heating up lately. We've been talking about it for about the past, 5 days or so on the podcast. It's a great sign for Nick Castellanos, but it probably wasn't the biggest moment of the game simply because, and I know, he walked off. How is it not the biggest moment? You had to get there, and you had to battle through to get there because it was a tight game the whole way. So let's talk about what led up to the moment that was a first pitch in the bottom. And you might say there was a batter before Castellanos. Bryson Stott was intentionally walked on 4 pitches from the dugout, so that doesn't mean pitch was technically thrown. First one was the walk-off winner, scoring Whit Merrifield, who was the zombie runner, ghost runner, whatever you want to call him, at second. But Castellanos didn't have his best day. That was his only hit of the night. He walked twice, which was nice to see, but there were no Phillies with multiple hits in the game. 8 total hits for the team. Nobody with multiple, only 1 RBI in actual regular innings. Then you have the Nick Castellanos RBI in the bottom of the 10th. So it was a slow offensive night for the Phillies. And that means that you probably had to have some pretty darn good pitching to find a way to win. Christopher Sanchez was outstanding once again. 6 innings, only allowed 4 hits, 1 earned. He had 1 walk. He had 3 Ks. It didn't feel dominant because it was a lot of balls in play, but a lot of ground ball outs, a lot of not hit hard balls that really played to the favor of the Philadelphia Phillies. So, yeah, Christopher Sanchez has been really darn good, and he's making the Phillies look smart for keeping him in the rotation. We've had that conversation many times. Maybe more impressive than Sanchez. Did I just try and give him – whose nickname was that? Mark Sanchez when he played for the Jets? I think they call him the Sanchez. Maybe if Christopher Sanchez picks up ground on Wheeler and Nola and Suarez and all the other great pitchers on this team, I don't think he's ready for that nickname yet. But besides Christopher Sanchez, there were some really strong performances from the bullpen. Jose Ruiz went an inning with 2 Ks, allowed 1 hit, but got out of it clean. I mean, everyone else was clean from this point. As you know, the Phillies only gave up 1 run. They won 2-1. Orion Kirkering was awesome, dominant in the 8th. Matt Strom in the 9th was so darn good. He had first and third with 1 out, and he struck out Rhys Hoskins. And then he goes ahead and works out of it with a fly ball to center field to Johan Rojas. And just like that, you had the opportunity to go into the bottom of the 9th and try and win it. The Phillies did not get that done. So Seranthony Dominguez goes out there with a runner on second. He didn't look like he had his best stuff. He didn't look like he was having a good night. Hit a batter, had the runner on second. And yet still, it doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to work. And he got out of that 10th inning without allowing the runner from second to score. It was great work by Seranthony Dominguez to make sure the Phillies had a chance in the bottom of the 10th. And I told you how that went with Nick Castellanos. So kudos to Christopher Sanchez. Kudos to the Philadelphia Phillies pitching staff, top to bottom. Everyone who appeared in this game did their job. And that's a tough thing to do. Like Sanchez went 6 innings. You needed 4 more innings of work. And the bullpen's been a little bit taxed lately. They have 2 off days coming up tomorrow and Friday, because I'm recording this episode on Wednesday. And that will help everyone kind of settle in before their trip across the pond to London. But for last night's game, that was a tall task. And the bullpen and Christopher Sanchez, they were all up to it. Love to see that. But also the biggest at-bat of the game, let's talk about it, because the Phils had nothing going. They had moments where they had like first and second, but they really didn't even have like, I don't know, situations where it was like you have second and third with 1 out and you don't get someone in. You have bases loaded with no outs and you don't get someone in. Like, no, they didn't really have those last night. They couldn't string together hits, and the numbers overall for the team don't look awful with 8 hits in the game, but they just weren't cashing in. So when it got to the bottom of the 8th and the Phillies were still losing 1-0, and you're like, well, are they going to get shut out tonight? Alec Bohm stepped to the plate, and he hammered one to left center field, a 420-foot bomb over the angled wall in left center. If it had been any lower, it might have been inside the Parker anyway, because we know how the ball bounces off that part of the ballpark. But such a huge at-bat for him. And the Phillies didn't score in the 9th, so that means Bohm doesn't hit that homer. They lose this game. That's why I say, like, Castellanos' at-bat may not have been the biggest at-bat of the game, may not have been the biggest moment of the game, because there's no outs. I mean, in the 10th with 2 guys on, you could probably still scrape a run across, even if that's like a fly out to right. You have second and third with 1 out. You just need a ball to the outfield. So, yeah, both huge at-bats. Bohm's, to me, much bigger because of how it kickstarted everything. And from the moment Alec Bohm hit that ball out of the yard, the huge crowd, 40,000 plus again at Citizens Bank Park, was way into the game. It helped Nat Strom get out of things in the 9th. It helped Seranthony get out of trouble in the 10th. It helped give the Phillies the confidence they needed, I guess, to walk it off in the bottom of the 10th. So getting the crowd into it's a big part of it as well. I just love the fight in this team. It was a very gritty win. And another part of it that is outside normally we talk about how good was the pitching? How good was the bullpen? How good was the offense? It's very rare that you look at a Phillies game and you say, man, how good was their defense last night? But last night, how good was their defense? And it was Alec Bohm a lot over at third base. He made some amazing plays. There were a couple he didn't make where they weren't errors. He just didn't get the ball in time. But with soft contact and a ground ball pitcher, you need your infield to make big plays. I mean, Bryson Stott made a big play, gunning out the go-ahead run at home. Like, it would have put the Brewers up in the 9th inning. They went ahead and cut that down. JT Realmuto taking some beatings. We'll talk about that. He deserves his own segment, as I told you in our opening. But the infield was outstanding defensively. The outfield got the job done. They didn't make any like crazy spectacular plays. Like, there's no highlights coming out of the Phillies outfield last night, but they made the plays they were supposed to, and that's all you can really ask for. And I am completely impressed by the way that this team can win any type of ball game. If they're not going to hit, they're going to field until they get a chance to warm up the offense. If they're not going to field, they're going to have a pitcher that can strike a bunch of guys out. If they're not going to pitch well or field well, they're going to hang 8 or 9 runs on you. If it's a long extra innings game, they'll find a way to grind it out. If it's a slugfest, they'll find a way to outslug you. They do. If they lose a pitcher, just a hypothetical here, if one of their great starters was happened to be hit by a line drive early in a start, Could they put the bullpen out there for 7 innings of a game and end up finding a way to win it? Yeah, they could. They did that with Ranger Suarez. And it's just, I can't say enough good things about this team. Another great win. A series win, their second straight series win, and now a chance for the sweep. So coming up next, we're going to talk about what they can do to go for the sweep and lock that down in today's game, a 4 o'clock weird afternoon game. We'll talk about that coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. First, though, it's game time. I'm not saying game time. Game time's at 4. No, I'm talking about game time. The ticketing. Come on, you know what game time is. When you think tickets, the first thing that should come to your mind after that is, oh, game time. Why? Well, not just because Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier, but because Game Time has so many great features that the other guys don't have. They do it so right. They have killer last-minute deals. So prices actually go down closer to first pitch on Game Time. You can get views from your seat before you buy your ticket. So it'll show you a picture on their app or the website. Slightly obstructed view. Oh, I can see this better. That, the other thing, if you have any of those issues with your seats, well, then you can pick a different seat. Or if you're comfortable with that, Game Time will let you know before you go. And they've got their lowest price guarantee. It's not just, if you find a lower price somewhere, we'll give you your money back or whatever. No, if you find a lower price in the same row and section as your tickets, they'll give you 110% of the difference. They'll give you more money on top of your money. They'll pay you for it. That's how confident they are. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. And the other thing they do that's great is they show you the fees up front. They don't hide anything in at the back end. It's not just baseball. It's all sports. It's comedy. It's theater. It's concerts. It's everything you could want a ticket to. Game Time can help you get that. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and plus you use code LOCKEDONMLB. You'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today because they've got last-minute tickets, lowest price, and that's guaranteed. Okay, the job's not done, folks. It's great to win 2. You know what's even better? Winning 3. And that's what the Phillies are going to try and do today from the Milwaukee Brewers. They're going to try and take 3. Final game of the series is a 4 p.m. strange afternoon time. I believe it has something to do with the fact that they're flying to London, so they wanted a later flight, so it kind of goes overnight. If you've ever flown internationally, flown over to jolly old England, you normally leave in the mid-afternoon or evening, and then it'll fly through the night, and you'll get there during the day the next day or morning the next day. If you fly, let's say I had a 1 o'clock game and they flew at 4, I guess that would still work. I don't know. It's something weird with the international travel. I believe why you have the weird time. And some weather in the area. You might see an issue with rain tonight. We've heard that a billion times with the Philadelphia Phillies games so far this season. Tough thing is with international travel coming, it's going to be very hard to play this game. The Phils have 2 off days, but that's to go abroad. It'll be tough to be we'll play tomorrow. They're going to try and get this game in. I don't know what the chances are. It seems like they may have an early window. It may get a little dicey late. So first thing, score early. Because if this is one of those games that becomes official after, what do you need to do, 5 full innings? You're going to want to not have a game stolen from you because the Brewers got up 1-0 like they did last night and you don't score to the 8th. You might not have that chance. Kind of a tricky situation today with all of the surrounding factors. But let's talk about the actual game because let's assume they get the whole game in. Everything goes fine. What needs to happen? Well, Aaron Nola needs to be really good, and the Phillies need to absolutely take advantage of Aaron Ashby. He's 0-1 on the year with a 9.82 ERA. He's only made 1 start. 1 game, 1 start. There's not a big sample size there, right? As far as innings pitched, he only threw 3 2/3 innings this year. This could be a situation where he's in the opener role like we've seen the past couple days. The Brewers actually technically started the same pitcher 2 games in a row. And that doesn't happen very often, but they've been employing the opener strategy, which has kind of worked for them. They've kept the Phillies quiet. But Aaron Ashby's on the mound for Milwaukee with a 9.82 ERA. Aaron Nola is on the mound with a 3.03 ERA for the Phillies and 1.03 WHIP. He's another one of those guys, right? It's not as quiet as Christopher Sanchez because Nola's name carries significantly more weight. He's a star player. He's been in Cy Young races before. He got the big contract this offseason to re-sign and come back with the Philadelphia Phillies. But he's kind of quietly had a better season than you would probably think when you look at the numbers. Just in comparison to Zach Wheeler and Ranger Suarez, it's hard to really laud anybody when someone else on your team or two other guys on your team and in the rotation are doing something like that. But my point is Nola's been very good, and he's going to have to keep the Brewers offense at bay. The Brewers have scored one run in each of the first two games of this series, a 3-1 victory for the Phils on Monday, a 2-1 victory last night that we just talked about. So they're susceptible to having their bats quieted. I'm very interested to see if Nola can keep that going. I believe so. And it's been righty-lefty so far with Wheeler and Sanchez. So now you have Nola going and another righty to kind of switch up the thought process from the Brewers. I don't mind that at all. Not that they're going to change the rotation, but I kind of like how that breaks out. It's just luck of the draw sometimes. Pitching matchup, major advantage for the Philadelphia Phillies, especially considering the Brewers' offense hasn't been great. That's why on the money line, the Phils are minus 185 favorites. That is the biggest favorite line for the Phillies so far in this series. Part of that has to do with the fact that the Brewers' offenses look so rough. Part of it has to do with the discrepancy in pitching matchup. 64.7% chance for the Phillies to win, according to ESPN Analytics. Who needs to have big days? Ashby, a left-handed pitcher for the Milwaukee Brewers. So I'm going to look at some righties. Alec Bohm, does that home run get him going? He's been kind of quiet lately after having an incredible first month and a half, basically 2 months of the season. He's quieted down. He's still leading the team in batting average, but he's batting 296. He's now under 300. He's leading the team in RBIs. He has 50. So, he hasn't been bad, but he hasn't been as hot as he was. Was that late home run last night kind of one of those, okay, I'm going to get going again games? Look for Alec Bohm to have a day. Nick Castellanos, he's been hitting the ball hard. He had 2 walks yesterday. He's clearly seeing it well. If he's walking 2 times in a game, look for him to have a day. And also, just a guy that needs to get it going. Kyle Schwarber, it's June, and he knows it's June. He has a calendar, I believe. I don't think they keep Kyle Schwarber in the dark as to what the date is. He knows it just like every other human being, but he was 0 for 3 last night, 2 strikeouts, 2 walks. I like him getting on base, but I like better the June Schwarber that hit like Babe Ruth and just left the yard every 5 seconds. So I'm going to be looking at Schwarber closely the deeper we get into June to see if we have a breakout. Now, the upside is you needed June Schwarber the past couple of years because the Phillies started off the year awful. They did. They stunk the past 2 years to start the season. And now you don't really need him to be a superhero in June because you're already playing that level of baseball. But if you can turn into that, imagine how much better this team could be. I was having the same conversation on the air over at 97.5 The Fanatic this morning about Nick Castellanos. And we were talking about, how good can this team be if Castellanos gets hot? They'll reach another level. And you could say that about a couple of guys. Bryson Stott's another one who he's had flashes, but he hasn't played as well as he could have, or I guess hit as well as he could have. Defense is always going to be solid for him. You're looking at a bunch of guys, and I guess Whit Merrifield maybe is another one if you believe he's going to come out of the slump that he's been in a tough spot, coming off the bench, being a utility guy. Hasn't been very good for the Phillies. But the ceiling of this team is still higher than where they're at right now. And they're already tied for the best record in baseball. They were the first team to 20, 30, 40 wins, first team to 20 wins above 500. How many more stats do I need to give you? How many more things do I need to say? How many more arguments do I need to make for this team to not only be considered a great team, but to be considered as a team that maybe has more in the tank than what they're even showing right now? We'll find out. If they can sweep the Brewers, there is no more they can't beat good teams. That goes out the window. So Braves fans, stay out of my mentions. Coming up, we're going to have to talk about JT Realmuto. And it's not a conversation. Normally when you say we have to talk about someone, it's like, oh, we got to have a conversation about this guy. He's not doing this, not doing that right. This is a positive one. I can't comprehend the toughness of this guy, and he deserves us to take some time to talk about him. So we'll get into that coming up as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Let's talk about FanDuel. Maybe you think the Phils are going to sweep today. Maybe you want to throw some money on that. Well, there's one place you should go. It's FanDuel. They're America's #1 sports book, and it's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL. FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and so much more. You could bet futures. If you think the Phils are going to win it all, hey, put it on them to win the World Series. If you want to bet series, I mean, you could bet the series finale or series finals, I should say, for the NBA and NHL finals. Who wins? Edmonton, Dallas, Boston, Florida. Kind of mixed up the teams there, but you get it. You can bet everything on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count or every pitch in the baseball regular season count. Because FanDuel, like I told you, is America's #1 sportsbook. I don't even know how to start. To possibly give credit to JT Realmuto for how tough he is. He's always just a grinder, right? He's out there. He does not miss games often. He plays the toughest position physically. He's getting up there in age. He hasn't lost a step. He hasn't really lost production. He's not the guy he was like 2020, 2021, even 2022. Like that was kind of prime JT Realmuto. And now you're getting slightly, I think, post-prime JT Realmuto just from an offensive standpoint. But one thing that will never leave this guy is his toughness. There were comparisons on the broadcast by John Kruk, who played with Darren Daulton, who was like the guy on that 93 Phillies team, leader in the clubhouse, tough as nails. Nobody messed with Dutch. In a clubhouse of a bunch of tough guys, he was the leader. And while this is a different type of clubhouse, and JT Realmuto is not quite the vocal leader that Darren Daulton is, he's tough as he is. And John Kruk was saying how he might be the toughest catcher the Phillies have ever had, the toughest player. And here's where that stemmed from. If you didn't catch the game last night, well, JT caught one in a place that you really don't want to catch on. A bad foul tip, direct contact with the twigs and berries, we'll call him. He got hit in the nuts. And it was not good. He was down for a while. He was not feeling good. Eventually, the pain went away. But then later on, they get out of that inning. The next inning, there's a play at the plate. We already talked about it a little bit. Bryson Stott comes home to cut down a run. It's a tag play. The slide kind of comes up and in on JT. He gets hit in the head a little bit. Still makes the play, tags him out. And we're like, my goodness, this dude is just a absolute. I put a tweet out. Is he the Terminator? Is he human? I don't know what this dude's deal is or how he can possibly take this level of beating and abuse and be ready to go. Rob Thompson last night, by the way, non-committal as to whether or not JT will be in the lineup for today's game. Let me double check and see if we have a lineup or not because of all the abuse he took last night. He took one in a place that no guy wants to get hit, and then he got hit in the head. He was kind of banged up and all of that stuff. He finished the game easily without a second guess, but maybe he'll need a day. He said after the game, nothing, he being JT, said nothing a cold tub won't fix. So we'll see if he's out there. But I love this team so much. And it's because of guys like JT Realmuto. It's because these dudes are tough. They fight. They are good teammates. And they don't try and do, it's not always flashy. Bryce Harper's kind of the flashy guy on the team. Kind of. He is the flashy guy on the team. But most of these guys just go out there and no knock on Bryce. I love that he plays the way he does and has the swag that he does. But a lot of these guys are just go out and get the job done. You don't have to make too much of it. You're going to have fun while you're doing it. And you're going to fight until the end because you know you're good enough to win ball games. And that's kind of what JT Realmuto embodies. And that's what this team embodies. So a great, great game by him last night and another show of toughness from a guy that we already know how tough he is. And this team is tough. Are they sweep worthy over the Brewers, though? We're going to find out today at 4. So go ahead and check that out. We'll recap it on tomorrow's episode. Then we got a couple off days, so we're going to do some fun off-the-cuff stuff. I'm going to talk to Sully of Locked On MLB for just the national perspective on the Phillies. It's a lot of good stuff coming. Hopefully, some good stuff coming at 4 with the Phillies win. But again, that's all for today's episode. Thank you for checking us out. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff that really helps us out. And I will talk to you tomorrow on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.